For a long time, humanity had believed that joining the Galactic Council was the greatest step in its history. It was the day Earth stopped being alone in the universe. Billions had watched as the first human ambassador shook hands with alien leaders on a distant world under the shining lights of peace and unity. It had felt like the beginning of a golden age. But years later, that dream had started to fade. At first, things were good. Humans shared their technology, their science, their creativity. The Council admired humanity's ability to adapt, to rebuild, and to survive no matter how hard things got. But with every passing decade, Earth kept growing stronger. Its colonies expanded faster than any other species had expected. Human ships reached deep into unknown sectors, mining new worlds, building outposts, and forming alliances. Some of the older civilizations didn't like that. They had ruled for thousands of years, always being the ones who decided what was allowed and what was not. In quiet corners of the galaxy, whispers started spreading. Some council members said that humans were too ambitious, too unpredictable. Others said that Earth's strength might one day challenge the balance of power. Those words spread like dust in the wind, and soon suspicion turned into fear. One evening, in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a secret meeting was called. The room was filled with the leaders of the most powerful alien races. The walls shimmered with strange lights, reflecting off their scales, fur, or metallic skin. Holographic stars floated above the center table, each glowing dot representing a member world. In the far corner, Earth's light shone bright blue, small but noticeable. The meeting began quietly, but the tension was heavy. The Council's high speaker, a tall being with crystal-like skin, spoke first. It claimed that Earth's fleets had grown too large, that humans were building weapons beyond what was allowed under the peace accords. Others quickly joined in, showing reports of human expansion near restricted zones. Some said that Earth was secretly training soldiers on new colonies. The evidence wasn't solid, but it didn't matter. The Council wanted control. A few voices tried to defend humanity. They reminded everyone of the times humans had helped during crises, when Earth's ships had saved thousands during a supernova, or when humans had volunteered in disaster zones on alien worlds. But those voices were drowned out by the louder ones, the ones filled with fear. After hours of argument, the high speaker called for a vote. The decision came faster than anyone expected. With a majority vote, the Council declared new restrictions on Earth. Trade routes were to be closed. Human ships would need special clearance to travel beyond their solar system. Council inspectors would have access to human military facilities for safety checks. It was a diplomatic way of saying that Earth was now under watch. The announcement was made publicly the next day. When the message reached Earth, it hit like a shockwave. People gathered around screens, listening as the Council's spokesman spoke in calm, polite tones, pretending it was just a precautionary measure. But everyone could feel the truth behind the words. Humanity was being treated as a threat. In cities across the planet, confusion turned into frustration. Why would the Council, once a symbol of unity, treat Earth like an enemy? News anchors tried to explain it, analysts debated it, and citizens demanded answers. But the explanations that came from the Council were vague and distant. They talked about maintaining balance and preventing conflict. None of it made sense. Earth's leaders gathered for emergency meetings. They sent messages to the Council, asking for clarification, asking for fairness. But every reply was the same: diplomatic words with no meaning. Behind the polite language, it was clear that trust was broken. At night, the skies above Earth glowed with the quiet light of orbiting stations. Inside one of them, human engineers watched as their systems were shut down by Council orders. Cargo ships were forced to return home, and trade hubs went dark. Many people lost their jobs overnight. The feeling of betrayal spread deeper. On the outer colonies, the anger was even worse. Those living far from Earth had relied on interplanetary trade to survive. Now they were stranded, cut off from supplies and news. The Council's blockade wasn't just political, it was personal. Families were separated. Communication lines were restricted. For many, it felt like a punishment. And yet, through all the chaos, humanity did what it had always done. It endured. Factories began retooling to produce their own resources. Farmers on Mars and Luna colonies started growing food in underground farms. Scientists worked day and night to replace the technologies that had depended on Council trade. Humanity was cornered, but it was not broken. As days turned into weeks, the world began to adapt. But underneath that quiet strength, something else was growing, a sense of unity. People who had once argued about politics, nations, and borders now found themselves on the same side. It wasn't Earth against itself anymore. It was Earth against the unfairness of the galaxy. In the United Earth Assembly, representatives sat around a large table, discussing what came next. Some wanted to protest peacefully. Others believed Earth should prove it could defend itself. The oldest representative in the room finally spoke up. His voice was calm but heavy. "If they fear us," he said, "then let them see what they are fearing. Let them see that we are not weak, but neither are we reckless. We will stand our ground." The decision was made quietly, without fanfare. Humanity would not attack, but it would not bow down either. The defense systems that had been sleeping for decades began to stir again. Orbital platforms reactivated. Old warships, once museum pieces, were quietly moved into dry docks for refitting. Engineers worked long nights without rest. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. People noticed small changes in the sky. New satellites appeared. Supply ships made unusual flights. Rumors spread, but officials said nothing. They didn't need to. Everyone knew that Earth was preparing for something. Across the galaxy, other civilizations watched closely. Some pitied the humans. Others secretly admired their courage. A few even sent quiet messages of support, knowing they couldn't say it publicly. The Council's influence was strong, and no one dared to defy it openly. Still, humanity didn't respond with hatred. There were no calls for war, no speeches filled with rage. Instead, there was silence, a deep, calm kind of silence that carried weight. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Back in the Council's chambers, the High Speaker watched reports of human activity. It told the others not to worry, claiming Earth would eventually submit. "They are emotional creatures," it said confidently. "They will cool down soon," but not everyone agreed. One of the younger council members, a species known for its keen instincts, spoke quietly after the meeting ended. "You don't understand them," it said. "Humans are different. When they are treated unfairly, they don't forget. They wait. And when they rise, it's never just for revenge, it's for respect." Those words went mostly unheard, buried under politics and arrogance. The council carried on with its plans, unaware that it had already crossed a line that could never be undone. On Earth, people went about their daily lives, but there was a new feeling in the air, something powerful and unspoken. The world had seen betrayal before, but this was different. This time, humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was defending its right to exist freely in a galaxy that didn't want to see it rise. And so, as the nights grew longer and the stars seemed to shine a little colder, humanity waited. Not with fear, but with quiet determination. They didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. If the Council pushed them any further, the galaxy would remember what happened when humanity's patience finally ran out. The decision of the Galactic Council had changed everything. A quiet sadness spread across Earth, mixed with anger that burned deep inside. Days turned into weeks, and the people slowly began to realize that the Council's restrictions were not temporary. It wasn't just about rules or security anymore, it was about control. Humanity had been singled out, treated like an outsider among the stars it helped explore. On the news, images showed empty ports where once fleets of ships used to dock. Space elevators that once lifted goods to orbit now stood still. Families with loved ones on other planets could no longer communicate freely. Every message had to pass through council filters, and sometimes they never arrived at all. The feeling of isolation grew stronger with each passing day, but humans are strange creatures. They don't just sit and accept unfairness. When the world closes its doors, they start building windows. When someone tells them they can't go further, they find another way. That's exactly what began to happen. In hidden research stations, engineers and scientists worked around the clock. Old technology was dusted off. New ideas were tested, and inventions began to appear that even the Council couldn't have predicted. Humanity started producing its own materials, its own systems, its own engines. No more relying on alien parts. The Council had meant to weaken Earth, but instead it forced humans to become stronger. People came together like never before. On the streets, people didn't talk about different nations anymore. They talked about Earth as one home. The flags that once divided them now flew side by side. Humanity had found unity through struggle. It was something beautiful but also dangerous, because a united humanity was something the galaxy had never seen before. At the same time, the Council continued to watch closely. Its intelligence network reported every move Earth made. Whenever humans repaired an old ship or activated a satellite, it was noted down. The Council saw it as suspicious, maybe even threatening. They didn't understand that humans were simply preparing for survival, not conquest. In their grand chambers, the alien leaders discussed how to handle the human problem. Some said they should send envoys to calm things down. Others wanted to tighten control even more. In the end, they agreed to send a monitoring fleet, a group of ships that would patrol near Earth's borders, to make sure humanity didn't misbehave. When the fleet appeared on the edge of the solar system, Earth's telescopes caught sight of it instantly. Massive alien vessels hovered far from the moon's orbit, just close enough to send a message. Their presence was clear, they were watching. People on Earth were furious. Why was the Council treating them like criminals? The government sent messages demanding the fleet to leave, but the Council responded with silence. That silence was worse than any insult. It said, "You don't matter." Still, humanity didn't respond with violence. Instead, it focused on itself. Universities reopened special programs for space research. Factories started producing ships again. Not warships, but exploration and cargo vessels, as they claimed publicly. But everyone knew there was more to it. These ships were stronger, faster, and heavily shielded. If the Council tried anything again, Earth would not be helpless. Ordinary people played their part too. Pilots volunteered to test new engines. Miners worked longer hours to extract rare materials from the asteroid belt. Even farmers on Mars joined the effort by growing food for those working in remote research outposts. It was no longer just governments, it was everyone. Slowly, the mood on Earth began to change. The sadness of betrayal turned into quiet determination. The fear was gone, replaced by purpose. Every time people looked up at the night sky, they didn't just see stars anymore. They saw the challenge ahead, and the promise that humanity would rise again. Far away, in one of the Council's communication hubs, a small group of alien diplomats started to worry. They had seen this before, long ago on other worlds. A civilization mistreated and underestimated until it became too powerful to ignore. They warned the High Speaker that pushing Earth further would only lead to disaster. But the warnings were dismissed. The Council believed humans were emotional, impulsive, and divided. They thought Earth could be controlled forever through pressure and politics. They didn't know that something new was being built beneath that calm surface. In the cold deserts of Mars, construction crews worked day and night on something enormous, an underground complex that didn't officially exist. Rumors said it was a new defense command. Others said it was a shipyard for something far greater. The Council had spies everywhere, but even they couldn't confirm what was happening. The humans had become very careful. One night, as the red sun set over Mars, a group of young engineers stood outside the facility, watching a test launch. A small ship rose into the air, its engines glowing bright blue against the dark sky. It wasn't much to look at, just a prototype, but to them it represented hope. The leader of the team smiled quietly and said, "They think we're weak. Let's keep it that way. For now." Back on Earth, people were getting used to life under the Council's shadow, but every restriction only fueled more creativity. A group of students invented a new communication system that didn't rely on Council satellites. Independent traders found secret routes through space, avoiding patrols. Humanity had begun to move like water, flowing around every obstacle the Council placed. But beneath that quiet resistance, anger still lived. Every family that had lost contact with loved ones because of Council blockades carried a silent wound. Every worker who lost their job due to restrictions held on to that pain. And slowly, those feelings connected everyone together. It was no longer just anger, it was unity with purpose. Then something unexpected happened. A cargo ship belonging to a neutral species, one that had friendly relations with humans, was stopped and searched by the Council near Earth's orbit. The ship's crew protested, claiming they had permission, but the patrol ignored them. The incident didn't turn violent, but it was enough to send a clear message. The Council didn't trust anyone who dealt with Earth. When the news reached the planet, the anger returned full force. Protests broke out, not violent ones, but massive gatherings where millions stood together under one sky. They didn't carry weapons. They carried signs and lights that read, "We only wanted peace." The images of those gatherings spread across the galaxy. On other worlds, many non-human species watched and felt sympathy. They saw a civilization standing tall, refusing to fight but also refusing to kneel. Some even began questioning the Council's judgment in private. For the first time in a long while, the Council's authority was being quietly doubted. In response, the High Speaker sent another message to Earth, a formal statement saying the Council's actions were necessary for galactic safety. But by then, those words meant nothing. Earth had already stopped listening. The people knew what the Council really meant by safety. It meant control. Meanwhile, inside secret command centers, human strategists met quietly. They didn't talk about attacking anyone. They talked about what to do if the Council ever took the next step. Every move, every plan was defensive. But the plans were detailed, and they were serious. The galaxy didn't realize it yet, but the balance of power was starting to shift. Humans were not just surviving, they were evolving. They were becoming something the Council couldn't predict or contain. Out in space, the patrol fleet remained near the edge of the solar system, watching silently. Their commanders sent back reports, noting increased human activity but seeing no open threat. They didn't know that deep below the surface of Earth and Mars, new technologies were being tested, quietly, carefully, waiting for the day they might be needed. Months passed. The Council began to relax, thinking the humans had accepted their fate. They didn't understand that the silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. Humanity had learned patience the hard way. And so, as another sunrise lit the blue planet, something was changing deep within the hearts of its people. They were tired of being underestimated, tired of being treated like a danger simply because they were strong. They didn't want war, but they wouldn't live on their knees either. The Council had drawn the line, and though they didn't know it yet, they had stepped too far. Humanity's patience was not endless, and the day was coming when the galaxy would learn what happened when that patience finally broke. For months, the skies near Earth had been silent but tense. The Council's patrol fleet floated beyond the edge of the solar system, their ships shining faintly against the stars. Every human on Earth knew they were there, watching, listening, waiting for any excuse to step in. It was supposed to be a peacekeeping mission, but everyone understood what it really was: surveillance. The galaxy didn't trust humanity anymore. People tried to go on with their lives, but that uneasy feeling never left. Every time someone looked up at the night sky, they wondered if those lights in orbit were stars, or Council ships spying on them. Farmers on Mars said they sometimes saw shadows move across the red sky, like dark birds gliding silently. No one said anything out loud, but everyone felt it, the calm before something big. Inside Earth's control stations, the situation grew more frustrating by the day. Council ships were stopping every human transport vessel that left the solar system. They said it was for security inspections, but everyone knew it was a way to remind humanity of its place. The inspections often lasted hours or days, and sometimes the ships returned damaged. Crews were treated coldly, questioned like criminals. Then one morning everything changed. A small human transport ship was making a routine trip between the moon and one of the nearby colonies. On board were workers, families, and a few scientists, ordinary people heading home after months of work. They were unarmed and following all Council flight rules. But as they passed near the outer orbit, a Council patrol ship intercepted them. The human captain sent the usual message, politely offering identification. There was no reply. Then another message came through, an order to stop engines and prepare for inspection. The captain obeyed. Everyone stayed calm. The passengers waited, uneasy but trusting that the Council wouldn't harm civilians. Minutes passed. The inspection ship drew closer, and then, without warning, its sensors locked onto the transport. The crew barely had time to react before the entire vessel shook violently. Systems went dark. The passengers screamed as alarms blared. The transport began to spin out of control, its outer hull scorched and cracked. The attack lasted only a few seconds, but that was enough. Back on Earth, Mission Control watched in disbelief. The live feed from the ship flickered, then vanished completely. Technicians tried to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the operators whispered the words no one wanted to say. They fired on civilians. When the news reached the public, the world froze. Every broadcast, every screen, every news outlet showed the same shocking image. the damaged ship drifting lifeless in space. The Council quickly released a statement calling it a technical accident, saying the patrol ship's systems had malfunctioned. But the explanation didn't convince anyone. The truth was clear. The Council had crossed a line that could never be undone. All across Earth, the silence of disbelief turned into outrage. People poured into the streets, not with weapons, but with voices. They chanted, they demanded justice, they called for truth. For the first time in a long time, every human stood together. No nations, no politics, just one voice shouting against the injustice done to them. On the colonies, the anger was even stronger. They had lived under the Council's shadow for years, and this was the breaking point. Miners refused to send resources to Council-controlled stations. Scientists pulled their research from shared databases. Everywhere, humans were cutting ties. Inside the United Earth Assembly, the atmosphere was tense. The hall was filled with delegates from every corner of the planet and beyond. The debate went on for hours. Some called for restraint, others said Earth should respond firmly. But deep down, everyone knew that something had changed forever. Finally, one of the oldest delegates stood up and spoke slowly. His voice was calm but filled with emotion. "We have tried peace," he said. "We have shown respect, patience, and hope. But they have answered us with humiliation and blood. We cannot undo what has happened, but we can make sure it never happens again." Those words echoed around the room. No one clapped, no one shouted, but everyone understood. The meeting ended quietly, yet the decision had already been made in their hearts. Humanity would no longer let anyone decide its fate. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Around the world, factories that had been shut down for years came back to life. Engineers started working in shifts, day and night. Massive structures rose along Earth's orbit, platforms that glowed in the darkness like watchful guardians. The hum of engines filled the air again, and the dry docks that once built colony ships now prepared something far more powerful. But despite the activity, Earth didn't announce anything. There were no threats, no loud declarations, no acts of aggression. Just silence, steady, focused silence. Humanity wasn't preparing for war. It was preparing to never be cornered again. The Council noticed. Their intelligence reports were filled with confusion. They couldn't understand how a civilization once dependent on them was suddenly operating on its own. Their scientists couldn't trace the source of Earth's new materials. Their analysts couldn't decode the encrypted transmissions between human bases. It was as if Earth had vanished into a veil of secrecy. Meetings were held in panic. The High Speaker demanded answers. They must not be allowed to arm themselves, it said. If they do, the balance will break. But by then it was too late. The balance had already broken the moment the Council ship opened fire. While the Council argued, Earth stayed quiet. In hidden facilities, human engineers were testing new shields, new propulsion systems, and defense networks that no one outside the planet knew existed. Pilots trained in deep space simulators, learning how to operate ships that were still being built. The human spirit had awakened, and this time there was no going back. Still, humanity didn't forget who they were. They didn't become hateful or cruel. They didn't want destruction. They just wanted respect. They wanted a voice that couldn't be ignored, and a home that couldn't be threatened again. As the months passed, the mood across the galaxy began to shift. Rumors spread among other species about what Earth was building. Some said it was a new kind of fleet, something never seen before. Others thought humans were bluffing. But even those who doubted could feel the change in the air. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's determination. And then came the day of the memorial. Across Earth and all its colonies, people gathered to honor the lives lost on the transport ship. No one spoke of war. They spoke of unity, of peace, and of dignity. Billions watched as the ceremony was broadcast across space. The message was clear. Humanity still believed in peace, but it would not forget. After the ceremony, a single message was sent to the Council. It was short, only a few lines long. Earth remains committed to peace, but we will not stand unguarded while being treated as a threat. We ask for respect, not control. We ask for cooperation, not inspection. This is our final request. The Council read the message in silence. Some wanted to respond calmly. Others wanted to tighten control again. But no one could ignore the tone. It was calm but firm. It carried the weight of a civilization that had reached its limit. In the following weeks, human ships stopped responding to Council patrol calls. They didn't attack, but they didn't stop for inspection either. The Council fleet hesitated to react. They knew that another mistake could ignite something they couldn't contain. The galaxy watched in suspense. Every planet, every outpost, every trader felt that something big was about to happen. Humanity had drawn its own line, and everyone wondered what would happen when the Council crossed it again. On a quiet night, as Earth rotated under a blanket of stars, a small child looked up and asked his parents, "Why do they hate us?" The parents didn't know what to say. After a moment, the father replied softly, "They don't hate us. They fear what they don't understand. But one day they will." That simple truth echoed across generations. Humanity didn't seek to rule the stars. It only wanted to stand tall among them. But the Council had mistaken kindness for weakness and peace for submission. They had crossed the line once, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when humanity's patience finally ended. The days after the memorial passed quietly, but that silence was heavy. The Council had not apologized, nor had they admitted their mistake. They hoped time would make people forget, but humanity did not forget. The image of that broken transport ship still haunted every person who had seen it. That single moment had changed how humans looked at the galaxy forever. Back on Earth, the mood was different now. People didn't speak much about fear anymore. They spoke about responsibility, about making sure no one could ever hurt them like that again. In the factories, workers built with purpose. In laboratories, scientists worked late into the night. Every person seemed to carry the same silent mission, to protect what was theirs. In orbit, construction never stopped. Massive structures took shape above the planet, giant frames made of dark metal glowing with faint blue light. To the untrained eye, they looked like research platforms. But those who knew better understood what they really were. These were the foundations of something new, something powerful. The Council had always believed humanity lacked discipline, that they could never organize themselves the way the older civilizations did. But they were wrong. Humans had learned how to work quietly, together and with one goal. They didn't need to brag or show off. They just needed to be ready. Meanwhile, the Council continued to observe. Their ships watched Earth from afar, trying to read its movements. Reports poured in about increased energy activity and the construction of unknown structures. The Council demanded answers. When no explanation came, they sent warnings. Humanity ignored them. Inside meeting halls and command centers, Earth's leaders gathered almost every day. They were tired of being polite, tired of waiting for fair treatment. But they also knew they couldn't afford to make reckless moves. Every decision they made was calm, deliberate. The goal wasn't to start a war. It was to make sure the galaxy understood that Earth would never be a victim again. Slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. One by one, the hidden projects that humanity had been developing for years began to come alive. The first of the massive ships rolled out of the orbital docks, a breathtaking sight. Its hull shimmered with dark silver, and its engines glowed like twin suns. It was unlike any ship the Council had ever seen. Bigger than any cruiser, stronger than any freighter. It wasn't made for attack, it was made for deterrence, for protection. The world watched its first launch in silence. The media called it the Guardian of Earth, though the official name was never shared. It was a message to the stars. Humanity was done being helpless, other ships followed. Not hundreds, not yet, but enough to show that Earth wasn't bluffing anymore. Each vessel carried advanced shielding, independent power systems, and long-range defense modules. Everything was new, developed without a single piece of Council technology. Humanity had rebuilt itself from the ground up. Across the colonies, people cheered as news spread. It wasn't about revenge, it was about pride. The feeling of unity that had begun during the crisis was now unbreakable. Mars, Luna, Titan, all the human world stood behind Earth. For the first time, they felt like one civilization, one heartbeat. The Council began to panic. Their ambassadors demanded meetings, their fleets adjusted positions, and their spies scrambled to gather information. But by the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. Earth had reached a level of independence that could no longer be controlled. Still, humanity didn't make threats. They sent a clear but calm message. Our home will never attack first, but we will never bow again. Some Council members tried to reason with Earth. Others wanted to send a stronger message, to remind humans who truly ruled the galaxy. But even among the Council itself, cracks were beginning to appear. Many alien worlds no longer supported the constant pressure against Earth. They had seen humanity's courage, their unity, and their dignity. Quietly, some even began to admire them. As all this happened, Earth continued its work. New research centers were built under the oceans, hidden from the Council's eyes. Massive energy reactors powered the construction of more ships, while orbital rings connected colonies across the solar system. Humanity was building something greater than an army. They were building independence. One evening, as the first of the great dreadnoughts rose into orbit, people gathered across the planet to watch. Families stood on rooftops, children pointed at the sky, and for the first time in years there was no fear in their hearts. There was pride. That bright light rising through the clouds wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol. A symbol that Earth was no longer small, no longer weak, no longer voiceless. The Council's sensors detected the launch instantly. Their analysts ran scans and simulations trying to measure the ship's power. What they found frightened them. The human dreadnoughts were far beyond what the Council had expected. They were faster, more efficient, and protected by shield systems that defied standard energy readings. Emergency meetings were called. Some members insisted on sending more patrols, while others warned against provoking humanity further. The debate grew heated, but deep down everyone in that chamber knew the truth. The balance had shifted. Humanity was no longer the quiet, obedient member of the galaxy. It was now a force to be respected. Despite all this, Earth's leaders sent another message to the Council. It was simple. We seek peace. We are ready to defend it. That line echoed through the galaxy. To some, it sounded like a warning. To others, it sounded like wisdom. Humanity wasn't trying to conquer anyone. They had seen enough of pain and loss. They just wanted to live in peace on their own terms. Still, the Council couldn't let go of their pride. They believed they were the protectors of order, that no civilization should be allowed to rise too quickly. Their arrogance blinded them to what humanity truly was, a mirror showing everything the Council had forgotten. On distant worlds, ordinary aliens began talking about Earth in a new way. They spoke of humans as the race that refused to break. They shared recordings of the memorial speeches, the images of unity, the videos of ships launching silently into the sky. Slowly, the galaxy began to respect the very civilization it had tried to control. But back on Earth, people didn't celebrate too loudly. They knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far greater. They were preparing for whatever might come next. Every new ship, every shield array, every defense platform was built not from fear, but from a quiet promise to never be vulnerable again. In the night sky, the new dreadnoughts shone like moving stars. From the ground they looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but everyone who saw them knew they carried a message stronger than any words. Earth was ready. Weeks turned into months. The Council's patrols kept their distance now. They didn't come close to Earth's orbit anymore. Even their communication tone had changed, from commanding to cautious. The humans noticed it. They could sense the shift in power, and yet no one on Earth spoke of revenge. The pain of what had happened still lingered, but the anger had transformed into determination. Humanity didn't want to rule the galaxy. It wanted to prove that kindness was not weakness, and peace was not submission. In a quiet moment one evening, an old engineer who had worked on the first dreadnought stood by the ocean and watched the waves. He had spent years helping build something that might never be used in battle. But he smiled because deep down he knew what it meant. The ships weren't symbols of destruction. They were symbols of survival. Somewhere far away in the Council's chambers, the High Speaker looked at a hologram of Earth and frowned. It had hoped that sanctions and control would keep humanity contained. Instead, they had created something stronger, smarter, and united. The speaker turned to its advisors and said almost to itself, "We wanted to weaken them. We made them unstoppable." Back on Earth, the cities glowed softly under the starlit sky. Life had begun to return to normal. Children laughed, workers smiled, and the air carried a sense of quiet hope. But beneath that peace, the engines of the new fleets hummed softly, always ready. The galaxy might not have realized it yet, but a new era had begun. Humanity had found its strength, not in anger, not in power, but in unity. The Council had crossed the line once, and now, They stood face to face with a civilization that would never again be underestimated. And as the largest of the dreadnoughts glided into the darkness, disappearing among the stars, one thought echoed across every human heart. Never again would Earth be treated as defenseless. Never again would humanity bow. The galaxy had gone quiet for a long time after humanity's message reached every corner of space. For the first time in years, there were no warnings, no threats, no sudden attacks. The Council watched Earth from afar, their fleets keeping a cautious distance. They thought that silence meant control, but they were wrong. That silence was humanity's preparation, an invisible storm building strength beneath calm skies. Across the solar system, human stations buzzed with quiet activity. Engineers fine-tuned the new dreadnoughts. Commanders studied defense maps that stretched beyond the orbit of Pluto. Communication networks linked every outpost, every mining colony, and every ship in the fleet. Humanity wasn't hiding anymore. They were building something greater than anyone had imagined. The Council had underestimated human patience. They believed Earth would react with anger, rush into battle, and prove them right. But instead, humanity waited. They strengthened their alliances among their own colonies and formed silent agreements with neutral species, tired of the Council's control. One by one, those smaller civilizations began sharing resources, technology, and knowledge with Earth, quietly, without drawing attention. Still, tension hung like a shadow. The Council's pride could not handle what they saw as defiance. They had ruled unchallenged for centuries, deciding which worlds rose and which ones fell. To them, humanity's independence wasn't bravery, it was rebellion. And rebellions, in their view, needed to be punished. In a secret chamber deep within the Council's core world, the highest-ranking members gathered. Holographic stars filled the room as voices echoed across the hall. Some wanted peace. Others demanded action. Earth must be reminded of its place, one counselor said coldly. If they believe they can build fleets without permission, what stops the others from doing the same? That sentence sealed the decision. They would send a fleet not to destroy Earth, but to contain it. To the Council, that meant intimidation, showing power without open war. They called it a peace mission, but everyone in that room knew what it really was. Weeks later, hundreds of Council warships began to move across space. They formed a line stretching thousands of kilometers wide, heading toward the solar system. Each ship carried advanced weapons, energy shields, and troops. Their goal was simple: surround Earth, force it to obey, and remind humanity that the galaxy still belonged to the Council. But humans saw them coming long before they arrived. The new defense network detected their movement the moment they left their borders. Every satellite, every scanner, every listening post came alive. The message spread instantly: the Council fleet is coming. On Earth, no one panicked. People didn't run or hide. They looked up at the sky with calm determination. The lessons of the past had taught them one thing: never again would fear control them. The fleet commanders didn't waste a second. They activated the defense protocols. The dreadnoughts rose from their stations like sleeping giants awakening from slumber. The sound of their engines vibrated through the air and into the hearts of every person watching. Soon the entire solar system became alive with movement. Patrol ships took their positions, defense satellites aligned, and communication channels lit up with calm, steady voices. Humanity wasn't preparing for revenge. They were preparing to protect their home. The first contact came when the Council fleet reached the edge of the solar system. Their admiral sent a message that echoed through every human channel. This is a peace enforcement mission. Lower your defenses and surrender your military power for review. Failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression. The message reached Earth's main command. The officers stood in silence for a moment. Then one of them said softly, "They still think they can command us." The response that went back to the Council was simple and steady. Earth does not surrender. We are not aggressors, but we will defend ourselves. When that message reached the Council fleet, their leaders hesitated. The humans weren't threatening. They weren't yelling or provoking. They were calm, too calm. That silence made the Council nervous. It wasn't the tone of a civilization afraid. It was the tone of one that was ready. As the fleet moved closer, human sensors tracked every step. Earth's dreadnoughts began to form their own formation, aligning in perfect precision. From afar, it looked like a dance. giant ships gliding through the dark, glowing softly under distant starlight. The first confrontation didn't start with weapons. It started with light. The Council ships tried to block communication lines and disable human satellites with interference beams. But humanity had built new systems that were immune to old tricks. Every attempt failed. The Council's admirals grew frustrated. They decided to push forward. Then came the moment that changed everything. Without warning, one of the Council cruisers fired a warning shot across a human defense platform. It didn't hit, but it came close. The energy flash could be seen even from Mars. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. Every sensor, every radar, every command station went silent. Then the human dreadnoughts moved. They didn't attack recklessly. They repositioned, their shields activating in layers, forming a glowing barrier that surrounded the solar system. The message that followed from Earth was clear and firm. You fired the first shot. Stand down or leave our space. The Council didn't leave. They believed the humans were bluffing. They had always seen Earth as an emotional, impulsive species. But this time they were wrong. Humanity was different now. The human dreadnoughts began to emit powerful energy signatures, but no weapons fired yet. It was a warning, a show of power unlike anything the Council had ever witnessed. Their sensors couldn't even read the energy properly. It was something new, something beyond their technology. The Council fleet hesitated again, and then something unexpected happened. Ships from nearby neutral systems began arriving, ships that weren't human but had come to watch. They didn't take sides, but their presence spoke volumes. The galaxy was watching this moment closely. If the Council fired again, it wouldn't just be a fight against Earth, it would be a fight against the idea of freedom itself. Inside the Council fleet, arguments broke out. Some commanders wanted to retreat. Others wanted to finish what they started. But while they argued, humanity acted. In perfect silence, the human dreadnoughts activated a field that surrounded the entire solar boundary. Every Council ship inside suddenly found its systems disrupted. Their engines flickered, their weapons froze, and their communications filled with static. The humans didn't fire. They didn't destroy anything. They simply shut the fleet down, peacefully, completely. From Earth, another message was sent. You came here with threats. We answer with restraint. Leave now before we make this permanent. That message echoed through the galaxy. Billions heard it. For the first time, the mighty Council fleet was powerless, trapped by a technology they didn't understand, outmatched by a world they once mocked. One by one, the Council ships began to withdraw. There were no explosions, no battles, no losses. Humanity didn't need to destroy anyone to prove their strength. They had already won, through control, patience, and unity. As the last Council ship turned away, a quiet cheer spread across every human colony. People didn't shout with joy, they sighed in relief. The fear that had haunted generations finally broke. They had stood their ground against the strongest power in the galaxy and forced it to back down without war. Later, when reports spread across the stars, countless worlds began to question the Council's authority. If Earth can stand against them, one alien leader said, why can't we? The ripple of that single event began changing everything. Back on Earth, the leaders didn't celebrate. They knew what they had done was just the beginning. The galaxy would now see humanity not as a fragile world of dreamers, but as a civilization that could hold its own. In the following days, messages of respect began arriving from distant planets. Some offered trade, others offered friendship. For the first time, Earth wasn't seen as a student, it was seen as an equal. The people who had lived through the dark years finally smiled again. The scars of loss were still there, but so was pride. Humanity had found its voice. As the dreadnoughts returned to orbit, their metallic surfaces reflecting the sun's light, people on Earth stood outside to watch them. To a child, they looked like giant stars moving across the sky. To the older generation, they looked like a promise that peace could exist, but only if you were strong enough to protect it. In the quiet that followed, the same thought echoed across the planet. Humanity hadn't fought for dominance or control. They had fought for dignity, for the right to exist without fear. The Council had crossed the line once. They had awakened something they didn't understand. Now they finally knew the truth. Earth's strength wasn't in its weapons or ships. It was in its people, their unity. and their unshakable will to defend what was rightfully theirs. And as the sun rose over the blue horizon, shining over cities rebuilt from pain, one thing became clear: the galaxy had changed forever. The tension that had once ruled the galaxy began to fade, replaced by a quiet kind of respect. News of the Council's failed mission spread faster than light itself. Every world that had once feared the Council now whispered about Earth, the small blue planet that had stood against giants and made them retreat without firing a single deadly shot. It wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point in galactic history. On Earth, people tried to move on with their lives. But things had changed. The stars no longer looked unreachable. The same sky that once felt full of danger now looked full of promise. Humanity had proved to itself and to everyone else that it didn't need permission to exist freely. That realization carried more power than any weapon ever could. In the weeks that followed, the Council's leaders gathered in silence. The humiliation of their defeat weighed heavily on them. For centuries they had ruled through fear and control. Now one act of human defiance had shattered that illusion. Their pride was broken, and their authority had begun to crumble. At first, they tried to cover up what had happened. Official reports claimed that the Council fleet had withdrawn for technical reasons. But the truth couldn't be hidden. Witnesses from neutral worlds had seen everything. They shared recordings of the human dreadnoughts surrounding the solar system, of the Council ships frozen in space, powerless. Those images spread across every communication channel in the galaxy. And with them, the legend of humanity grew. Across distant worlds, people started to question the Council's leadership. Some planetary governments even demanded freedom from Council rule. For the first time in ages, the galaxy began to shift. The power that once rested in the hands of a few was slipping away. But Earth did not take advantage of the situation. Humanity didn't send its ships to conquer or threaten anyone. Instead, it opened its doors. Trade routes were established. Peaceful communications began, and humans offered help to smaller worlds that had suffered under the Council's strict control. Instead of acting as new rulers, they became protectors, guides for those who wanted to stand on their own. This surprised everyone. Many had expected humanity to rise with anger, to seek revenge for the years of disrespect and pain. But that didn't happen. Humanity had learned something through its struggles. True strength was not about domination. It was about restraint. The human leaders often repeated the same phrase in their messages to other worlds. We don't want to rule. We just want peace built on respect. Those words spread through the stars and became a kind of promise. Meanwhile, on Earth, people began to rebuild more than cities. They rebuilt trust in one another. The fear of being small, the fear of being weak, it was gone now. Everywhere you looked, there was a sense of quiet pride. Children learned about the day humanity stood up not as a tale of war, but as a story of courage. Artists painted the image of the dreadnought shining above Earth as a symbol of unity. Farmers, workers, and scientists all carried the same feeling inside. We made it. We didn't just survive, we changed everything. Far away, the Council's inner circle was falling apart. Some members wanted peace with Earth, believing cooperation was the only way forward. Others couldn't accept that humans, once considered the galaxy's youngest and most fragile species, had become powerful enough to challenge them. The debates grew intense, and for the first time in centuries, the Council's decisions were no longer unanimous. One group, led by older, wiser voices, proposed a treaty, a new alliance that treated all civilizations as equals. They called it the Accord of Free Worlds. To many, it sounded like a dream. For centuries, no one had dared to suggest equality in a galaxy built on hierarchy. But humanity's actions had proved that equality wasn't weakness, it was survival. When the Council reached out to Earth to propose the first talks, there was silence at first. The human leaders didn't rush to answer. They wanted to be careful. The memory of betrayal was still fresh, but eventually they agreed to meet, not in the Council's grand halls, but in a neutral system, on a quiet planet surrounded by calm blue skies and fields of glass-like sand. Representatives from hundreds of civilizations arrived there. It was the largest gathering in galactic history. Some came out of curiosity, others out of fear, but most came out of hope. When the human delegation finally stepped onto the platform, the crowd went silent. For the first time, the galaxy saw Earth's representatives not as newcomers, but as equals. They didn't wear gold or royal symbols. Their uniforms were simple, clean, and calm, just like their message. The leading representative stood before the council and spoke slowly, their voice steady and human. "We came here not to demand, not to punish, but to remind you of what we all forgot. The universe doesn't belong to one group or one council. It belongs to everyone who calls it home. You crossed the line when you took that truth away from us. But we're not here for revenge. We're here to make sure no one ever crosses that line again." There was silence after those words. Even the oldest council members couldn't find a reply. For centuries, their meetings had been filled with arguments, power plays, and pride. But now they were facing something rare: truth. The treaty that followed took months to complete. There were endless discussions, changes, and disagreements, but in the end, something incredible happened. For the first time in galactic history, the Council agreed to limit its control. Every world, no matter how small, was granted the right to self-rule. Earth was officially recognized as a founding member of a new alliance, a community built on fairness, not fear. When the treaty was signed, the galaxy changed. Old rivalries began to fade. Trade routes opened. Shared research programs started between species that had once ignored each other. The stars that had once been symbols of distance now became bridges connecting countless civilizations. On Earth, celebrations filled the night sky. Cities glowed brighter than ever, and people looked up knowing they had finally secured a peaceful future. The same dreadnoughts that had once stood ready for war now patrolled space as peacekeepers, protecting trade routes and helping worlds rebuild after years of oppression. But even in peace, humanity stayed alert. They knew that power could easily corrupt again. They remembered how quickly pride had turned kindness into cruelty, so they built their new age on a single belief: that respect must always come before power. Generations passed, but the story of what happened never faded. Children grew up hearing about the day when the Council crossed the line, and humanity refused to kneel. It wasn't told as a story of rage, but as a lesson that true courage isn't in striking back. It's in standing firm for what's right without losing your humanity. On quiet nights, people still watched the sky. The great dreadnoughts, now shining with peaceful lights, drifted across the darkness like guardians. And on the Council's worlds, the story of Earth became a symbol of change. Where there had once been fear, there was now respect. Where there had once been arrogance, there was now understanding. Years later, when historians looked back on that time, they didn't call it a war. They called it the turning of the stars. It was the moment when an entire galaxy learned that strength and peace could exist together. Earth had not only defended itself, it had reminded the universe what unity truly meant. Humanity's rage had once erupted, but from that rage came wisdom, balance, and hope. And so, as the blue planet turned quietly under its sun, the people who lived there carried one simple truth in their hearts: peace is not given, it's earned, protected, and shared. The Council had crossed the line once, thinking Earth would break. Instead, humanity rose higher than anyone had ever expected. And from that day forward, every world that looked toward the shining light of Earth understood the same thing: never mistake kindness for weakness, and never forget the strength of those who choose peace over power. Because sometimes, the loudest roar in the galaxy isn't the sound of war. It's the silence that follows when humanity stands tall, unbroken, and free.